Well, welcome everybody. Before the session starts, I have a statement to read on behalf of the conference. The 2020 Open Education Conference is committed to being a safe, accessible, equitable, and inclusive environment for all. Following our code of conduct is essential to facilitating environments centered on these values in all conference spaces. The session is being moderated to ensure the code of conduct is followed. Please take a moment to reflect on the code and consciously act in ways that build on open education and our community and support diverse voices. As a reminder, this session will be recorded and live captioned, except for in breakout rooms if used. If there are unmet accessibility needs, please let us know as we strive to continually improve. As a reminder, please remain on mute unless invited to unmute by the presenters. I will now begin to record the session and turn it over to the presenters.
Well, thank you, Spencer. And hello, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm Liza Long. I am an assistant professor of English at the College of Western Idaho. And I'm so thrilled to be at my very first open education conference and presenting with some amazing presenters, Joel Glad and Amy Minervini. I'll let them introduce themselves in just a minute. We're going to be talking about our pandemic project, or what we did while we were all on lockdown. So we have created a modular first-year composition resource that we're very excited to share with you today. And with that in mind, we'd like to start with a little bit of a poll. We're not as fancy as some of the other people have been today, so we're going to ask you just maybe to drop your response in chat. And while you're doing this, we'd like you to consider what barriers or challenges you faced when considering or adopting OER. So has it been support from institutions, too few resources, too many resources, time to do an OER, concerns about quality, or something else? And while you're responding, I'm going to turn time over to Joel and Amy and let them introduce themselves.
Thanks, Liza. I teach with Liza at the College of Western Idaho, and I teach English 101, 102, American Literature Surveys as well. Amy, why don't you go and introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. My name is Amy Minervini, and I teach English and communication courses at Lewis Clark State College in Lewiston, Idaho.
Well, thank you, Joel and Amy. I'm wondering if one of you, since I'm sharing my screen, could take a look at that chat. What were some of the responses that we're seeing?
Time comes up quite a bit.
Yeah, support limitations, a lot of support, yeah, compensation.
Support.
Yeah, well, we chose these particular things because these were all barriers that we felt that we faced. And so if you feel that way too, you're not alone. And we would like to walk you through some of the things that we did to create this OER we're going to share with you today. We'll each be presenting about 5 minutes, and we're going to start with Joel, then I'll present, and then finally Amy, and we hope to have some time for questions and also for your comments or feedback. And I will be sharing a document at the end of our presentation that includes the resources we talk about. All right, Joel.
Yeah, thanks, Liza. I'm looking at the chat here. Larry is mentioning like quality being a reason. That's something I want to hit on. So that's part of why we're kind of proposing a modular textbook approach instead of a traditional curation route. So I think I want to go over some challenges we faced, and you'll probably kind of sympathize with these, and then why we thought the modular approach was the best solution for us. Part of this has to do with the curation. And again, this is kind of hitting on Larry's comment. We noticed there's a wide variety of OER textbooks. For us, it's first year writing, composition, English 101, 102 in the state of Idaho. And we noticed there's like high quality, low quality, but also different textbooks from different institutions, right? That creates its own complications. And then some textbooks from individual instructors. And so what's interesting is that you collect a variety of voices, and it adds complexity to the textbook, right? I mean, do you want to rewrite every chapter so it sounds the same? That's a problem we faced. We also wanted to bring in material from website articles and blog articles, and again, not have to reinvent the wheel. We didn't have a year, dedicated to just writing this textbook, right? So how do you do that? We also wanted to pull in content from OER readers, style guides, other specialized textbooks like literary analysis or stuff that's just focused on rhetoric. And I mean, if you look at Norton, publishers like that, Norton does fantastic work. They have separate textbooks for all these things. They have readers, they have style guides, they have composition textbooks. and students are expected to purchase these separately, right? And so if we want to bring it all together, what's that going to look like? What's the solution going to look like? And then finally, the content had different permissions. If you know anything about permissions, you'll notice that it can get like Creative Commons is not just Creative Commons, right? It's pretty messy. And so CC BY, that's pretty open, but then we ran across content that was NCSA, NDSA. How do you distribute and publish if it's a wide range? So that's an issue, right? The other complication for us is that we're developing this textbook, thanks Liza, for potentially all Idaho writing programs. In theory, any instructor at any institution across the state of Idaho in higher ed should be able to pick this textbook up and use it in their classroom, right? So what's interesting at the state of Idaho is that we have the same written competencies that apply to two-year community colleges as well as four-year research institutions. And if you've taught at a 2-year and a 4-year research institution, you'll notice that you can assume less about the students at a community college, and that requires additional materials. Next, Liza. So one solution, one approach is just to like collect a bunch of links, right? And just kind of curate and say like, hey, just kind of distribute a file to faculty and say like, hey, here's a lot of stuff we found that we think might work in, if you're teaching, if you want to use OER in your classroom. That's one solution, right? Next. Instead, we did want to attempt a textbook because we wanted to have a unified experience. And fortunately, Liza's going to speak more to Pressbooks, the platform we used. But fortunately, Pressbooks provided for us that unified experience. But we wanted to frame it as a modular textbook, right? And so the benefits of this is that this modular approach, you can see a screenshot on the right-hand side of the screen there. It has the title page and then just a brief snippet of the table of contents. It ended up being many chapters long and 2,000 pages plus if you want to print it out. But we're kind of treating it as our textbook as a platform, less than a textbook. And so it's modular, but it's almost like a writing platform and not just a traditional textbook. The beauty of this is that it invites multiple voices. We kind of let that complexity, that diversity, just kind of sit there, and we're comfortable with it. We do provide framing. We do kind of introduce some chapters if it's a little bit too jarring. We kind of have certain chapters speak to one another occasionally, but we're comfortable with that, with the diverse range of voices. It's also a one-stop shop for composition and rhetoric, style guides, readers, H5P exercises. We're kind of building that out right now in the process of doing that. Assignment examples. And so really, it's like a platform for instructors, for students, and we're getting feedback and material from instructors and students. One of the affordances of Pressbooks, because this can get really messy, can get really big, is the search option. And so we're encouraging instructors, students to really take advantage of the search in Pressbooks. And this is really beautiful for, we think, fostering academic freedom. We think it encourages instructors to just kind of turn to our textbook when they need it. And we don't force upon them like, hey, if you want to be successful in first year writing, this is how you need to teach it, right? So search for what you need rather than like, hey, this is how you should teach the course. During COVID, so again, kind of a modular textbook experience through Pressbooks, we're noticing that having a ton of material in the same place is helping us to link out to highly targeted instruction when students need it the most. And this kind of cuts down on the amount of noise that students have, right? Cognitive load is an issue right now. And what's beautiful about Pressbooks is that you can link to not only a chapter, but a section within a chapter, right? Another way of I guess, a benefit of framing it as modular is that as editors, we're telling ourselves like, hey, this is always in a process. It's never complete. Again, this is like a platform and not just a textbook. And it's always going to be like, we're always just going to be getting there. It's not going to be perfect, right? And then finally, additions and revisions are based on Idaho competencies, and we do have an overarching ethos of inclusion. So this is kind of tightening things up. There is an editorial process here. So it is modular, but at the same time, like we do want to be as inclusive as possible. That determines what we include, what we do not include, and kind of shapes our revision process. All right, I'm gonna let Liza kind of go more into the back end of how this is all working. And then Sandy in the chat, yes, we at the end, we will have a handout for you with a link to the textbook. Oh, Liza, you're on mute.
We can't have a presentation without someone being on mute. Thank you so much, Joel. So Joel talked to you about the overarching approach that we took toward this textbook, and I was especially glad that you highlighted the process view that we took toward this textbook. It seems like so often in academia, we feel like we have to have perfection before we're willing to put it out into the world. I'm going to talk more about how we created this textbook together. So let's get into it. Let's see. So the first thing that I think is important for us to remember is that OER is not free. And probably everyone who's not new to OER is nodding their head in the chat. So when we thought about tools and stakeholders, we had to keep this in mind. Who's going to pay for the labor? Who will pay to host the content? Are there free options? Joel showed you a Google Doc. You can, just send out links in a Google Doc, but what are the benefits and drawbacks of that? And then finally, what kinds of tools can you use to make sure that you license your work so others can use it? For us, the idea of open really did center on the idea that open education can be remixed and reused and adapted. So there are free resources out there. Khan Academy comes to mind, but Khan Academy is not open education because you have to use the content as it is created. So the first thing we did, we were fortunate to be able to identify some stakeholders who really cared about open education resources. And I have to say, when I came into this process, I had heard of OER, and that's about where I was. So this was not even a year ago. And the State Board of Education put out a call for this Opal Fellowship, and I responded to it, and also Joel and Amy did, and we were accepted into this Opal Fellowship program. And that's just been a tremendous benefit to us to have that level of support from our State Board of Education. They helped us to connect with the Rebus Textbook Success Program, and I will have links for all of this. And so we've had the opportunity of creating this textbook along with people in other disciplines, sharing resources, sharing ideas, and also sharing challenges. I think there's something to be said for the emotional support of working with peers who are going through the same challenges. Another stakeholder, our college departments have been very supportive. I'm the dual credit program coordinator for the English program. Dual credit is a big part of what we do in Idaho. And so we wanted to keep dual credit in the loop when we designed this textbook. Our colleagues at the Writing Center, like Jamaica Richter, who has helped us to review the book. And also we have colleagues in English language learning. But our primary stakeholder was our students. And Joel's already explained how that modular approach was so important to making sure that we were really student-centered. And not only are they stakeholders because they use the book, but we've made them stakeholders as we've used the book in our classrooms. We are asking students to contribute. We're asking them to comment and provide feedback. I've even gotten some delightful emails from students finding typos. So there you go. It really empowers students to see us model this process and to see the real world consequences, and they will have some publication experience as well. So involving your students is important. So the tools we used, we wanted to consider multimedia needs. Joel already talked a lot about how we chose the Pressbooks platform for this reason, but one of the advantages is we can embed videos through the Pressbooks platform, and we are trying to embed even more videos. We think a lot of our students learn this way. Google Suite was something we used for our collaboration. I'll be sharing a Google Doc with all of you at the end, and we have a form at the end of our book for you to provide feedback, which we are looking forward to using. We used Creative Commons licensed videos and images, H5P exercises for reinforcement. This is a really fun tool for students to be able to practice like grammar exercises and things like that, or even thesis statements. Adobe Spark and Microsoft Sway are two tools that Joel and I also use. Zoom, obviously. But one thing that was so important for us was also to keep accessibility in mind. And accessibility not just in terms of screen readers, which again, Pressbooks really helps with headers and those things, but also in terms of our rural community. So Idaho is very rural. Many of our stakeholders do not have reliable access to the internet. We wanted a book that could be downloaded and that could be printed if necessary. That's why we went with Pressbooks. So Pressbooks does have free options, but we're lucky again that our state board hosts it through the Open Education Network. It's $7,500 annually for them for unlimited books. So if you're not doing this with your institution or with your state, somebody should talk to them. That's a great stakeholder. It's easy to use and update. Cloning's easy, really easy to import stuff from other Pressbooks, and multiple formats, Kindle, PDF. It's highly portable. You can use it on your phone. Our students have liked that feature. Automatic updates to digital files. And yes, you can print on demand. So we recommend something like Lulu to print out a copy. Again, we didn't really design our book with that in mind. If someone wanted to print a book, we would recommend that they curate their own resources. So locate the things they wanted to use and then create their own book to print. I'm not really going to get into licensing because, as Joel already mentioned, Creative Commons is pretty complex. Amy and I were both able to take the Creative Commons certificate course, and I would say we learned a lot. But one thing we really like is that this provides a framework for us to share, reuse, and remix existing content. We chose the license that we did because of the works we chose to include. So if you are creating open education, one thing you could consider is licensing either CC BY or really dedicating your work to the public domain. This makes it truly open and usable. There are restrictions for things like non-commercial or share alike. No derivatives is very restrictive. The no derivatives works that we've included have been included as part of a collection in our book. And you remember, you can license your individual contributions with a different license. You don't have to use the same thing for the work that you do that you use for the overall textbook. This is another feature we loved about Pressbooks, that each chapter can be individually licensed. So if I contributed something, I can license it as CC BY. So with that in mind, I'll turn time over to Amy, who is going to talk about who and what we included in our book.
Okay, great. And so, yeah, I was just really concerned. We were really concerned with, again, who and what to include. Next slide, please. And we, of course, wanted to make sure that we were trying to be as inclusive as possible. Were we perfect in that? No, but we tried as best we could. And like Joel was saying, it is a work in progress. And so we are continually adding to it, but we wanted to be as representative as possible, as we know that that is so important to our students and to faculty who are going to be teaching from all over the state. Next slide, please. And we were really impressed with a number of OERs that we accessed at the beginning, ones that had a single voice, and we noticed some benefits to those, one being that there was consistency between and among chapters in terms of language and tone, and just some uniformity in the organization, the different things that were being provided, the rhetoric, activities, and takeaways from chapter to chapter. And from a student perspective, I know that students always really love routine and expectation. And so that was a nice aspect that we wanted to carry over. But we thought it was incredibly important to have multiple voices, not only our own, of course, but so many others in terms of students, speakers in the form of videos, as well as, of course, various authors and articles that we linked. And so just among ourselves, we had a myriad of different conversations about rhetoric, language, and how we approached composition, and even some differences in how we interpreted the student learning outcomes. But it turned out to be very fruitful because we included actually all of the different ways in which we teach writing to our students. The different voices also allowed us to just balance the different stakeholders, and as Liza was saying, to really think about our particular audience in rural Idaho and the Pacific Northwest region, and just think about those different students who might be accessing our book and what barriers they may have. We were able to include different voices from like a writing center director, Jonathan Lashley, our state board member, and rhetoricians, colleagues, and of course, we are seeking artwork from students. And then of course, general feedback as mentioned. And the real world implication is of course that we are mimicking what boardrooms across America do all the time, which is that collaborative aspect. Next.
And this is the 5-minute warning for the presenters.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So one thing we really wanted to do was just make sure that identity and storytelling was a main component. Of course, in writing, that is a huge aspect of it, and how students express themselves in those ways is incredibly important. So we had chapters that included all of those different things, including style and linguistic diversity, this, I believe, essay, which students can really get into in terms of their values. And then, of course, just even some chapters that instilled confidence in them, because we know that writing doesn't come naturally to a lot of students. Next. And then we wanted to make sure that we had, I personally have a social justice theme in my classes, and we wanted to make sure that our book reflected that as well. So we have a number of chapters that focus on allyship, equity, and inclusion. So there is an entire chapter dedicated to anti-racist readings and resources, anti-ableist, pro-LGBTQIA. There is an entire section on writing for social change, and then there was even a section on exercising your right to vote. We thought all of those are really important to include. And next. And we still want to add more things. We're not done. Our work is unfinished. This is exciting because each week we add more and more resources to our book, and we want to make sure that more voices are being expressed. I want to add in Latinx concerns, the essay. We want to make sure that Indigenous and Idaho Pacific Northwest writers are included. And of course, we want to hear more student voices in the form of sample essays. So we're going to be seeking those as well. And of course, feedback is always welcome. We'd love to include things that are meaningful to you and your students. That's it.
Spencer, how are we on time? Like 2 minutes?
That's right. And I think Liza was, there you go, Liza.
Unmute. With that in mind, this is our contact information, and I'm also going to share a Google Doc with you all in chat with the OER resources that we have created. So I'll just grab that link and send that to you. Oops, I don't know that we want everyone to edit it though.
Yeah.
We're gonna make you viewers. Okay, yes. But I'll drop that in chat. But while we're doing that, maybe Joel, do you see any questions that people have that we would?
Someone was asking Jonathan about our involvement and like how we got the state board involved, and like, let's see, were any of us involved in the advocacy for those funds? And I'm trying to remember the process. I mean, it's kind of a complex process. Jonathan sent his email address there to reach out to them. There's a lot of like behind the scenes stuff going on in how the grant got started, and Jonathan actually played a pivotal role in that process. So it's a lot of it has to do with him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just shared that link with everyone, and we would love for you to get in touch. So there's a link to our book there. I can drop the direct link to our book too, since we're in this book all the time. We have a feedback form at the end of the book where we would love to get your feedback. So yeah.
Someone else had asked, someone else asked about downloading specific chapters and not just entire book. Press books, I believe that's not something you can do right now. It does automatically update the digital files, so you can download like an entire PDF, and from there you could parcel out whatever chapter you wanted. But right now, I don't believe you can actually download just a chapter. That's something that we've asked for, but I don't think you can do that yet. But it does make sense. It does make sense.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
Excelsior
Excelsior's great,
Owl. Yeah. Thank you. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that, Mika, the Excelsior Owl.
Yeah, I love that resource.
Yeah.
My writing labs.
I do too. I use that one a lot.
I do as well.
They do a good job of incorporating H5P into their lessons.
Yeah.
As kind of like self-assessment, and we're kind of using that and as kind of a model for some of our chapters, how they do that. It's great.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan. That was a good answer to that question about funding. Yeah, but it really was a great project for us to have during the pandemic. I think we started the month before, guys, and then this was basically what we did while everyone was on lockdown. So it was nice to have something to focus on. Thank you, Spencer, so much that we're at time. All right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah.